victory and the agony of defeat.
Madison, great ball around the corner, Petticini, he beats them all! Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle, Sharks coming through, none of them can hold him!
All right, off to a banging start there, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone doing on a massive Tuesday night for the Tip Sheet and TCT? Hello and welcome to live chat. We've got plenty of people queued up having a saying of the greetings there. John, also known as 4020, the host of the Tip Sheet, and joining me is my good mate Sixties, and also joining us this week is a very special guest too, Craig. I'm going to throw it over to you to do the big preamble because I think this one needs a special introduction.
Yeah, well, it is a special episode of the Tip Sheet. It's going to be an extended news podcast. So after we wrap things up here at the start, we will go on with our normal Team List Tuesday podcast. But we're really privileged to have Eels CEO Jim Sarantinos join us live for this chat. Jim, we really appreciate you giving us your time tonight.
No, pleasure, Craig, and John. Thanks for having me on.
Well, look, and before we go too deep into this podcast, just our usual reminder to our viewers, if no matter what platform you're listening to this on or watching, if you can give it a like and subscribe, and also a shout out to our sponsors, the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club, and to Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Jim, before we go too far into this as well, this afternoon it was announced that Bryce Cartwright has left the Eels effective immediately. He's off to the club that he started at, St Mary's. I'm just wondering if there's anything you can add to the official announcement, like, you know, maybe how this might impact any potential upgrade of players into top 30 or anything like that.
Yeah, look, obviously the news about Cardi came out earlier today. These discussions have kind of only really surfaced over the last few days, but I think it became clear in Cardi's mind that he wanted to finish his footy career in a certain way, and that was at the club that he started his footy career at. He's still got really strong ties and connections there. Obviously, Cardi's been playing Reggie's most of this year, and I guess he, in terms of the end of his footy career, he wanted to wrap up there at St Mary's, and it kind of worked for both sides. So I think Cardi's moved on incredibly good terms. I think he really enjoyed his time here. He was great to have around at the club. Whilst he didn't play first grade this year, he still carried himself incredibly well and been a really positive influence around the place. So we wish him nothing but the best. In terms of what it means for the overall roster, look, it does provide us with a little bit more space, and we are obviously fast approaching the 30 June deadline. There's some things that we're working through at the moment, and for us, it is a fine balance between what activity do we drive for the balance of this year versus what do we preserve to be able to continue to build for 26 and beyond. But there are obviously certain players that we're looking at in terms of renewals and upgrades and so on. And part of that will also form part of our thinking over the activity over the next couple of weeks. Okay,
so it's just watch this space, I guess, Jim.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's nothing definitive for me to update you on in terms of player recruitment news or player retention news right now, but they are things that we're working on, and I imagine there will be some movement over the next couple of weeks.
Well, Jim, this is far from our first conversation over the years, but it is your first time on the podcast. And what we thought we'd do to break up the conversation into some key areas. And the first one we want to dive into is NRL Performance.
Yep.
So first of all, looking at the coach, there's a lot of support amongst Eels fans for Jason Riles and his staff. You selected Rilesy for this head coach role for various reasons, and I think a lot of us are on board with that. But what have you seen from him since he's been in charge that's convinced you that the club made the right decision?
The fact that he has stuck to the plan that he outlined for us when we went through the interview process. And he's had incredibly strong conviction in sticking to that plan. I think when we went through the process of selecting a head coach, we had some terrific candidates. But Rylesy clearly, over his time serving a very long and impressive apprenticeship, had formed a view of what he wanted his head coaching tenure to look like and what was going to be important to him in terms of the standards that were driven, the behaviors that were driven, the way in which players and staff interacted with each other, the way the club connected internally, but also with its wider community, and also the style of play, which then obviously leads to the style of player that you need to recruit and build a roster around. And he has stuck to those principles with conviction. Obviously, the results haven't necessarily been what we would have liked, but I know that he has the confidence in his plan and he is going to stick to it, and he has the support of everyone around him. So I guess that's the thing that's impressed me the most. He hasn't deviated. He hasn't been shifted by the fact that the results haven't necessarily been what we would have liked. He's going to stick to his plan, and we're all supporting him.
John?
Yeah, well, very much a case of trust the process here, and I think that you are seeing that product on the field really starting to turn for the Parramatta Eels in the vision that Jason Ryles has been executing. So positive signs there, and like you said, while the results as a wholesale sort of outcome haven't been there, very much the team is starting to turn, which is fantastic. So we move from coaching to staffing now, and we've witnessed a whole-of-club approach to the football staffing this season. Can you talk us through the rationale and importance of connecting all of the coaches from the NRL and the NRLW through their respective pathways?
Yeah, look, John, I think this comes back to, again, one of the core principles that Rylesy has as a head coach, and that is consistency and alignment from top to bottom. The success of our pathways is incredibly critical, and we've focused heavily on investment in coaching and development resources to make sure that we provide the talent that we have coming through our pathways with every possible opportunity to reach their potential and be able to slot into either the NRL or the NRLW programs. And I think Jason recognizes that those coaches having an exposure to those elite level programs and understand how he wants to coach, how he wants to communicate, the key lessons that are to be instilled into players. The coaches having visibility of that at the NRL level is going to provide them with the best possible opportunity of translating that through to every element of the Pathways program. So right from the start of the preseason, all of the coaches from the Pathways programs were welcomed in to the NRL training program. They were out on the field. They were contributing to sessions. They were running drills themselves. They were hearing firsthand what the head coaches and the assistant coaches at the NRL level were messaging to players, so that they were then able to take that back to their own individual programs and making sure that our players coming through our ranks are learning in the right way right from the start.
One of the things I found interesting too, Jim, was on the last couple of weekends with the lower grades up at Kellyville, seeing Josh Hodgson and Mitch Lewis there on the sidelines with our lower grades as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, those guys are heavily involved across all of our coaching programs, and I think it is it's a reflection of the learning and development focus. One of the key principles that I didn't touch on that Rylesy was very important for Rylesy was creating a learning environment, whether it be for staff, whether it be for players. You mentioned those examples of Mitch and Hodjo being involved in programs outside of those that they're the head coaches of. That's also extended to the NRL program. Mitch Lewis was in Rylesy's coach's box a couple of weeks ago. That's an incredible learning opportunity for him as a head coach. And I think it's just a broader philosophy across our coaching program that exposing everyone to different situations and unfamiliar situations is only going to help them to learn and to grow.
Yeah, I think one of the terms I was using in the preseason training reports was, as a teacher, I could see the scaffolded learning that was going on throughout the preseason sessions. So absolutely, he's created a learning environment. Moving now, Jim, onto players.
Yep.
The consensus amongst fans has been that the new recruits have added value to the team. How have you viewed the performances of the new recruits to the Eels this year?
Yeah, look, I think they've consistently been amongst our best contributors every single week. Look, I'm not going to mention every single one of them, but there are a few guys that come to mind. Obviously, Zach has been a terrific signing for us, albeit that he's missed some games where we would have preferred for him to be out on the pitch. I think there's a number of guys that are very early on in their career. I'm not sure that Isaiah Yongi could have delivered much more in the first 10 or 11 games of his first grade career, arguably playing one of the most difficult positions on the field. So he's done incredibly well. Jack Williams has been a terrific addition for the club, both on and off the field. The leadership that he's shown on the field and the standards and behaviours that he drives off the field are incredibly positive for the club. And we've had a number of younger, newer faces who have been given some opportunities. And I think we're seeing a lot of improvement in those guys. Guys like Kidione, guys like Jordan Samrani. Probably some of the injuries and I guess some of the players that are typically you would expect on the field not making it into the 17 each week have probably provided opportunities to some of these guys that maybe weren't anticipated early in the year. Yep. But I think they've taken those with both hands and they're showing a lot of improvement. So I don't think we could really be happier with the new additions to the club and the role that they're playing. And they're only going to get better. And the cohesion of the team is only going to improve as they play more footy together.
Yep, I agree.
We touched lightly on this, Jim, but there are a segment of fans and a very big segment that are disappointed with results because that's the nature of football, of course. But after an ugly couple of early games in the season, which sort of kicked off that big loss to Melbourne, people have been more encouraged by Parramatta's efforts in recent games, if not the execution entirely. Personally for you, what's pleased you most about the season to this point? And conversely, is there anything that you still want to see the team working on or anything that's sort of got you not upset, but, sort of areas of improvement, I suppose, for the squad in general?
Oh, look, I think there's always areas for improvement. I think probably if I look at the last sort of 5 or 6 games, we've been in those games, every single one of them. And I know the scoreline in the Dogs game probably didn't reflect it, but that game was anyone's game with 10 or 12 minutes to go in an environment where we probably didn't play that well. We defended we defended very resiliently, but we probably didn't play that well. And I think the biggest observation from the games that we've lost in these 5 games is that in that 5-game run is that we've probably shot ourselves in the foot. And we've probably contributed to those losing those games more than the opposition winning them. So they're things that Jason has identified at the end of each game. But the positive that we've seen in each of those games is Jason wanted to see 3 things from an identity perspective from our football team every single week, and they are fight, effort, and pressure. And I think we've seen those things in each of the last 5 or 6 weeks. Some of them have resulted in wins, some of them haven't. But I think those traits for the team have been there. And whilst the losses are disappointing, from the conversations that I've had with some of our members and fans, I think everyone is starting to recognise that we're starting to build an identity as a team. And as the cohesion of the team improves, as some of those errors start to get eliminated, as some of the inexperienced players gain more experience, more of that fight, effort and pressure is going to translate into wins.
Yeah, and I think that probably does sum up how a lot of people feel about the performance, especially over the last month and a half to 2 months. Just wrapping up 2025 NRL performance so far. This is a fan-submitted question. Has the club defined any short-term and long-term goals for NRL performance? I guess finishing spot on the table, that sort of thing.
Well, the goal is to always win premierships. But I think we also need to, I guess, appreciate that we're on a bit of a journey at the moment. And I know that that's going to take a little bit of time. I think some difficult decisions were made earlier this year from a roster perspective to try and fast track that and get us on a path where we were becoming younger and we were building the roster that's going to be the roster for our future. I think there's probably some further change that's going to be required over the next sort of 6 to 12 months to get us further along that path. For the balance of the year, certainly what we want to see is improvement, continued improvement, continuing to build that identity, those elements of fight, effort, and pressure, eliminating those errors that means that we're winning more games than we're losing. And hopefully we can get ourselves towards the fringe of the 8 and with a bit of luck towards the back end of the season, putting ourselves in a position where we are challenging for finals. But clearly a lot of things have to go our way based on where we are right now and to get ourselves into that position. But obviously we need to see further improvement next year. We need to be contending for finals and we need to be building towards challenging for premierships sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Okay. And that now takes us into the second area that I'll get John to kick off the questions with, and this is NRL recruitment and retention. This is something that a lot of fans were keen for us to ask questions about. So, John, I'll throw it to you to start off with.
Yeah, and there needs to be a caveat about some sort of circumspection from chat too. We can't just spill the tea on everything that's happening with the club here. So keep that in mind, guys. We will ask Jim a number of questions about recruitment retention, though. But in an earlier question, we did discuss the new recruits who have added value this year in 2025. I suppose a lot of people have been talking about the recruitment class in that light. How did the club get it so right this season, especially given that this time last year, a number of those players weren't on the market and just the state of the roster was in a vastly different position as well?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one to answer, John, but I think one key element that we've had right throughout our football program that I guess has influenced some of those recruitment decisions has been alignment. Alignment from a coaching perspective, alignment in terms of having a clear vision for the type of athlete that we wanted to recruit in specific positions to complement the game style that the coach wanted to play. And an alignment from a recruitment and a roster management perspective to go out and basically get those players that are going to fit the coach's plan, which is what we've always had, including in previous years. But I guess Jason had a very clearly defined vision for the types of players that he wanted to bring in to complement the style of play that he wanted to play. And the recruitment team, including Mark, Ben, Rolsey obviously plays his part, have gone out and got those players. And I think they've then been coached to complement the game style. So I think what you're seeing is that it's difficult always to weigh up what part of the pie you attribute to recruitment versus coaching. I think both of them play a key part. And I think we've recruited the types of players that the coaches wanted to play the style of play that he wants to play. And the coaches have done a great job in fitting them into the game plan.
Well, that's been a great summation of how it's worked this year. But recruitment and retention would rarely be a perfect process. And acknowledging that it's not always right, what has the club learnt from the recent past that will shape future recruitment, retention, and importantly, the subsequent contracts for players?
I think probably one of the key learnings, and again, this very much comes back to alignment, is making sure that you've got the right mix of short-term and long-term planning. And taking a long-term view early on the right players. In particular, I guess some of the players coming through our junior ranks. So earlier this year, and I think you have the luxury of doing this when you have a new coach who's new to the club, has a clear philosophy, and is looking to build things for the long term. It allows you to sort of take a view on your best players in your pathways and go long on them, and create a scenario where we have our best players tied up, our best players around the ages of 17, 18, 19 tied up for a 2 or 3 year period, and get them on a cycle where their first contract might be a junior rep contract. Their next might be a train and trial contract. The following contract might be a dev. And then the following after that might be a top 30, right? A minimum wage contract at the top, in the top 30. But if you take that long-term view and you take it early enough, it gives you the opportunity to give yourself every chance to coach and develop them in the way that you feel is best. And we've invested heavily in our coaching resources to be able to execute on that. But if you see them making the progression on an accelerated basis and you've got them signed up long-term, it allows you to go early again on an upgrade and extension and continuously keep that best talent at the club. And we had identified 17 or 18 players that were in that younger age bracket who we thought were potentially going to be critical to the future of the club. And we've gone ahead and locked most of those guys in for at least until 2027, or in some cases to 2028. And that gives us a long runway to work with those young players and really try and get the best out of them, whilst keeping them within our ranks. So that's been a key learning. I guess recruitment, as you said at the start here, Craig, recruitment and retention it's never perfect, right? If any club believes that they're going to have a 100% strike rate on recruitment and retention, they're kidding themselves. And that only, the best way that I can highlight that is the NRL provides every single year with all the clubs some key benchmarking data in terms of salary cap. On average, every club is paying somewhere between 5 and 6% to players that are not at their club, right? So that kind of gives you a bit of an indication as to the tolerance for error that you need to have if you're managing your cap effectively. That's the best part of $500,000 to $600,000 of cap space that you're paying to players that are no longer at your club, right? And that's average. That's not just the worst clubs. That's the average across 17 clubs. So I think having a preparedness to be more bullish and being aggressive and going early on situations where you may have made a mistake is also a key element. I guess, and I guess having the right discipline between making sure that you've got a clear plan for how much you want to spend on your players in the top 5 in your cap, how much you want to spend overall in your top 17, and then having a clear strategy on, let's call it the bottom third of the roster and how much you want to spend there so that you've got your value allocation right is also really critical as well. Because the last thing that you want is to have too much of your cap space consumed by players that are not playing in your top 17 every week. And I guess a key factor in all of this as well is getting your coaching right and making sure that each of your 30 players that are contracted to your top 30 are set up for success and are equipped to contribute every single week.
Yeah. And I guess you referenced there about, being prepared to, make calls on players in these situations where maybe they're not in the top 17 or, that maybe there's an error that's been made in the past or whatever. But we're very definitely seeing the roster being reshaped at the moment with players that have moved on and again continuing even with Bryce Cartwright at the moment. So it's something that I guess has been beneficial to both the players and the club. I think probably in all these instances it's been mutually beneficial.
Yeah, that's right. I think it really comes down to having open and honest conversations. And if the club needs to move in a certain direction to set itself up the way it needs to be for the long term, and that means that a certain player may not be in those long-term plans, it's only going to be hurtful for both the player and the club if that conversation doesn't happen. Because I think, look, Gutho is probably the best example, where clearly Gutho's still playing incredibly well, but Jason had a different view on what Gutho's future might look like at the club. And that was going to result in us kind of waiting and seeing how Gutho was going to contribute in a different role he had an opportunity to secure his long-term future on a great contract. It allowed him to secure that future. It allowed us to accelerate our future. And I think that that's been a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, it's an important reminder that these sort of player transactions don't need to be a win-lose or zero-sum outcome. Both clubs in St. George and Parramatta profited from the Iongi and Gufferson move there.
That's right.
And you did mention some of those young players being secured through 27 and then even 28 in some cases there. We did see the club just announce the retentions of Josiah Funa-Ayuta and Will Latu, which is obviously the tip of the spear, hopefully in that regard, with more to come, which will be good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, there's a number of other younger kids that sit beneath the surface. Obviously, Lorenzo's had a great season, SG Ball Player of the Year. He's locked up longer term.
There you go,
young
chat.
kids,
That's a big one.
Yep. Young kids like Sam Polly are locked up for a number of years as well. I'm not going to try and go through every single name.
It is an exhaustive list, and like you said,
it is a long list, but I guess the key message is we've identified who we think that top talent is, and we've acted early to try and secure them long term, so that so they understand that we're committed to their future, and hopefully we can coach them and develop in a way where they reach their potential and they're playing first grade in the blue and gold.
And to frame the next question, just a preface, Chad has obviously been pressing about a few issues, and one of them that came up is about a player we missed recently in Lachlan Galvin. And I think this question, while not directly tying to Galvin, does sort of touch on a similar topic here, in that notwithstanding the challenges of the ladder position, which obviously can be fluctuating in year-to-year basis, but given the advantages that Parramatta enjoys in terms of the facilities, club staffing and support, commercial strength and membership, we believe that the Eels should be a destination club always for off-contract players, but it hasn't always worked out that way. Does the club identify and track of why we don't land certain key targets, and how do you reflect on that process? And obviously, I mentioned Galvin as a player we missed recently. When you miss a player, what happens for the Eels?
Oh, look, there absolutely is a reflection. There needs to be learning from each of those situations. And the reality is that sometimes you get the process wrong, or you might get certain elements of the process wrong. But sometimes you might do everything you possibly can, and there are certain things that are just outside your control, and you miss out on a player. But the important thing is that in each of those circumstances, you need to reflect. If I think about the Galvin situation, I couldn't possibly tell you exactly what the reason was as to why he chose to go to Canterbury. Only he knows that, right? But what I do know is that I think he found it very difficult to make that decision. He clearly has a very close relationship with his long-running mentor, who is an assistant coach at the Bulldogs. And
yes, the coach Vela, I believe it is, isn't it?
Yep. And for a young person who's had such a strong influence in his life, to have that person as someone that he can have as continue to be a mentor at another club, I imagine would play a significant part in his decision making. Now, I don't know if that was the primary reason or if there were other reasons. Obviously, the Dogs are doing very well at the moment. So it may well have been a combination of things. But the reality is that the circumstances are different every time. We absolutely need to be a destination club. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned the facilities, John. They are definitely an advantage for us. And it's not just the way in which new players view them, but also the way in which your existing players feel about them and talk about them around the game. Those things play a big part. But I think the single biggest piece is the culture that you build within the organisation. And I have a high degree of confidence that what Jason is building within these four walls is going to stand us in good stead to attract top talent in coming years. It's also incumbent on us as a club to build really strong connections with the wider Parramatta community, whether it be members, fans, the business community as well, to be able to present opportunities for our players that potentially haven't existed in the past, and just build a level of strength and support around our club that positions us in the best possible way to attract top talent.
Jim, this, as I mentioned, was a very topical area for
a lot of people pushed this one. Yeah.
So there were multiple fan questions submitted about recruitment and retention. We'll try and sum it up in this question.
Mm-hmm.
Will the club have the cap space to pursue a couple of significant targets for 2026? And given Jason Roll's comments about the roster being an ongoing process, are there specific positions that the club will prioritise?
Yeah, so obviously there's only a certain amount of information I can divulge here, which I'm sure everyone would appreciate. The answer is yes, we do have cap space. I'm not going to talk about how much cap space we've got. That would just be completely inappropriate.
Lay down Mazare. Yeah.
Jim, just share it with us.
Lay down Mazare here. Just the Eels cap situation, please.
I think everyone understands that and respects that. But look, we do have room to move. Obviously, Dylan moving on does clear a considerable amount of space. But I think one thing that everyone has to understand is that we are also we do also have quite a bit of youth in our roster, and as that youth gains more experience and they continue to grow, their values and their contracts go up, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that you also need to manage. So Dylan Brown moving on doesn't necessarily mean that you've got 100% of Dylan Brown's money to spend the following year, because of the fact that other players are taking up more cap space as they develop and they grow.
Players can't stay on dev deals forever either.
Well, they can't stay on dev deals. If you give your fullback his very first opportunity in first grade and he plays as well as he has, you have to expect that he's going to earn more money in the coming years.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the challenge that every single club deals with. But regardless, we do have cap space. We're balancing, obviously, what our position looks like across the balance of 25 into 26 into 27, so that we can build a sustainable premiership challenging roster into the medium and long term. In terms of key areas of the roster, I think we're certainly going to look to bolster our forwards. There's no doubt about that. We need to shore up the hooking position as well, moving forward. And then obviously 5/8 is a position where we did have a target previously that we missed out on. I think you've kind of probably heard Jason talk since then about there potentially being some internal options that we might need to have a look at, or we could have a look at. So I think he wants to obviously take the balance of the season to take a close look at that. But again, if an opportunity arises for us to take someone off the market and that bolsters our ranks in the halves, then we'll do that. I think the critical thing in balancing a cap is whilst every club makes mistakes, you can't make too many of them, because that's when it completely throws it out of whack. So we've got to strike the right balance. We've obviously signed Mitch long term, and he's unashamedly our marquee player. We need him on the field, and we've got to build the team around him. So we do have some space. At the moment, we've got 27 players signed for 2026. So if you're working towards the top 30, that leaves 3 slots. That's not to say that we're only going to have 3 slots. There may be some further movement between now and 1 November. And we do have some space to work with to fill those positions, whether it be 3 or more. I don't know if I've answered the question exactly the way.
That's honestly pretty good clarity on the situation, given as much as you can share. And hopefully chat do understand that, like we said, we can't lay down Mazare here, because then the Eels have absolutely zero negotiating power. So thank you, Jim, for what you did share there. So that wraps up recruitment and retention. And thank you for taking some of those questions on notice there, in particular the Galvin one. So I didn't want to try and spring it on you, but I suppose in the framework of that question, it did sort of make sense.
I've answered it as clearly.
Exactly. So, and now we move on to the next portion of our questions. We'll focus on pathways and lower grades, because, of course, the Parramatta Eels are a development club, and it is the lifeblood of how we look to compete on a year-by-year basis. So I'll take the first question and give the next one the 60s, obviously. But the successes of the Pathways teams this year in 2025 should not be understated. Eels featured in finals football in all 4 junior representative competitions, played in 3 grand finals, took out both of the girls' competitions in the Lisa Fiala and the Tasha Gale, while the SG Ball had their hearts broken at the absolute death there in a real classic match against the Roosters. It was a dominant performance across the board. What does such success mean to the club when you have all 4 grades? Even Harold Matthews, who didn't feature in the grand final, but what does that sort of success mean to the club?
Well, it means that we've got the talent in our backyard. It means that our coaching and development is making a difference. And it means that we should be encouraged by how some of those players may progress through the ranks. If I can summarize it, it's been a terrific year. Our Pathways programs are led incredibly well by James Shepherd, who's one of the best in the game. There's few people that are, I guess, better educated in the game than what Shep is. And he's a terrific educator himself, a teacher by trade. So the way in which he can share and communicate messages is really important. I think we're also we're investing heavily in building the connections with those players at an early age, building the connections with their families so that they understand how valued they are and how we see them playing an important part. But I think having success together as players and as teammates is really important. I was obviously gutted for the SG Ball team in losing that game, not just for them on the day, but being able to carry that winning feeling through with them through the grades. And hopefully those players bounce back and they have that winning feeling. But I think the players having that winning feeling together at an early age and being able to carry it through is really important. And hopefully in 2026, we build on the moderate success that we had and the relative success we had in 25 and carry that forward.
Jim, look, I especially liked your comments about how what great communicators teachers are. I'll take that as I'll take whatever I can there. At this stage of the season, the New South Wales Cup and Flag teams have set the platform for playing finals football. And this is despite some major personnel disruptions for both teams, and especially Flag, because that just goes with the territory of, every Flag team probably at every club. But to what do you attribute the strong start to the season for both teams?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few elements there. I think Kalo and Rank are doing a great job from a coaching perspective. I think also the alignment of coaching has played a really big part. Where, as we talked about previously, Kalo's obviously a part of our NRL program, but Rank spent a lot of time with the NRL program during the preseason. So that alignment has played a really big part. And I think the other part is just the quality of the depth that we've got in the club at the minute. The last few weeks have obviously been really disrupted, probably no more so than what we saw against the Warriors on the weekend.
Yeah.
And obviously results didn't go our way, but I guess as a coach of a cup team and a flag team, you've got to be able to adapt to that. And it's just par for the course with those teams.
And to their credit, I thought the cup team battled pretty hard against the best team in the competition. I thought
KLC's
boys did pretty well up until the last sort of half an hour.
They did. I guess it's difficult building that cohesion when there's so much change.
So much disruption. Yep.
Amongst the team. But I think it is a product of the alignment of coaches throughout the program and players knowing what they need to do their job.
Now, Jim, we're going to skip the next question because I think you actually really answered that before.
Did touch on. There was a fan question about the sort of natural progression and success in planning, but you actually did a pretty good job sort of covering that when you're talking about the juniors you've been targeting for long-term sort of retention and whatnot. So that probably goes nicely. So, Craig, you want to double up into the next one?
Yeah, so we're now going to go into facilities. Can you talk us through how the club intends to use the combined facilities of the James Hardie Centre of Excellence and Community Centre and the Eric Tweedale Complex at Granville, and the type of feedback you've had thus far from the players and staff?
Yeah, look, I think generally when you look at the club's facilities and what we have now at our disposal, if you look at the combination of Combank Stadium as our home ground, our Centre of Excellence Community Centre at Kellyville Park, and the complex at Eric Tweedale, I don't think there'd be many clubs who would have better facilities than what our club does. We're incredibly blessed, and it's a far cry from what the club had 7 or 8 years ago, which basically was incredibly substandard. The privilege that we've got by having the size and scale and the quality that we have at Kellyville Park is just through the sheer volume of programs that we can run through this facility, which is the unique point of difference that we have as a club. So at the moment, the plan is that all grades from 19s and above across both male and female will train out of Kellyville Park and use the facilities at both the Centre of Excellence, the Community Centre, and the existing modular facility that we had. We will be retaining that gym on site, which basically gives us 3 gyms and 5 fields to utilise, which would be the envy of every single club. What we will continue to do, however, is base our 17s and junior academy programs out of Eric Tweedale. And there's a strategic reason for that. Granville Park is located more so in the centre of the catchment than what Kellyville is. Kellyville is obviously up to the north. When you're dealing with young 17-year-old boys and girls and below, obviously they're training after school a lot of the time. And the access to public transport, the central nature of Granville Park just makes it far, far easier to operate those programs out of Eric Tweedale. It of itself is an incredibly high quality facility for academy aged and Harold Matz and Lisa Fiola sized programs. So I think they would have access to as good, if not better, facilities than pretty much any other programs of their age group would have across the NRL. So strategically, that's how we're going to use the locations that we have at our disposal.
Good summary there, mate. Thank you very much. And sort of building on the Centre of Excellence there, recently there was terrific Eels media coverage of the players' families visiting the centre. You've also had former players touring that facility right through construction to the completion. What's been the most memorable responses amongst the family and the former players?
Yeah, look, I think everyone's reaction is overwhelmingly positive. I mean, we've got an incredible facility, and I think players, staff, family, they're all blown away by it. When you bring past players here who, in bygone eras, had the privilege of having their team meetings on a bus, coming in and walking through.
If you had hot water in the dressing room, you were happy back then, I suppose.
Yeah, coming through and walking through the luxury that we now have, they're kind of blown away by it. I'm not sure if many of the listeners were at the event last Friday or if they've seen on social media, there was a short clip of Sterlo speaking about the facilities and what they're going to do for the club in bringing all of the programs and everyone within the club together in the one location. For all the bells and whistles that we've got, it is that whole of club connection that is really going to drive, that is going to be the most important. We've got the highest quality of facilities right throughout, but it is that whole of club connection that's going to be the point of difference for us.
Jim, what I loved seeing as well was the personal touches when you saw Riley Smith's mum see the recognition of Riley having achieved representative football for Malta, and that was then shown on his locker. And that's what all the players have. They have their heritage. And then I think if they've made a representative team for that, for their heritage or whatever the country is, that also goes on the other side of the locker. So that
was based on input from the players. I mean, the players' locker room is the true inner sanctum, and that's their sacred special place.
Yep.
And we thought that it needed to have personal touches with input from them. And we asked them, what are the most important things for you? And they are their player number. That's effectively their identity as an Eel.
Yep.
Their heritage and their representative honours. So they're the 3 key identifiers that are represented on their player plaque across both the men's and women's teams.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, this is a quick one. When can any interested supporters expect to be able to go through the centre?
Yeah, look, we're working on this at the moment. Obviously, this is a place of work for us, and in particular for the players. And again, that needs to be something that's respected by everyone. But what we are working through is setting up tours for members during the off season. So we're just working through that process at the moment as to exactly what that would look like, the exact timing of the year. Because what we want to be able to do is to open up all the inner sanctum areas, and that's just incredibly difficult to do when people are working in those spaces. So it's important for us to just be able to pick the right time. And I'm expecting that over the next sort of month or two, we'll be able to come out with more information around when members will have the opportunity to access the facility.
Thanks.
Next up, Jim, as we continue to move on, because your time is very important, obviously, but I know everyone loves NRL success, but perhaps the single most exciting space for not just the Parramatta Eels, but the code is the NRLW. There is so much happening here and so much great stuff happening for the Eels in particular. So we've got a few questions here teed up to talk about. And I'll start off with the fact that it is now less than a month till we kick off in the NRLW. And have you received any feedback about how the preseason's been progressing? Because obviously we've been chatting with Steve with in his role as the sort of elite pathways director there for the SG Ball, Tasha Gale, Lissafiola and Harold Matthews. But he does the other cap at the club as the NRLW coach. And they've been going at it for a few weeks now, right?
Yeah, Georgie and the team have been they've been in pre-season. I think it's probably about 6 weeks now. Yep. They went pretty hard for the first 4 weeks. They took a bit of a break in between, which was always planned. And then they're obviously sort of leading towards round one in the first weekend of July. They've actually got their first trial game here at Kellyville Park on Saturday evening. So we're actually having a community welcome day, which hopefully members have sort of got some information on this Saturday. There's 3 games of footy being played. There's obviously an opportunity to visit the precinct, but it all culminates in the NRLW trial, which is kicking off at 6 p.m. on Saturday evening at Kellyville Park. But they've had a great preseason. They're obviously very much enjoying the facilities. There's a great feeling amongst the team. We've got some new faces who are bringing some energy. We've got some old faces who are bringing a lot of energy, as some of the girls typically do.
they got the energy, that's for sure. If you catch them on their socials, it is just a complete vibe. And I mean, I suppose this one's a bit on notice here, but Eels did fantastic, or represent the club fantastically in State of Origin across both teams. But there was a bit of a heart and mouth moment at the end there for Kennedy. But I think she's okay, on track for the season. Yeah,
look, she's still working through recovery. I'm not actually 100% sure what her scheduled return date is, but hopefully it won't involve missing any games. But she's still working through recovery. Look, I mean, Abby had an incredible Origin series. Rory was terrific. She unfortunately missed the third
with injury.
And Kennedy was fantastic up until the injury. So they obviously will come back from the Origin period with a burst of energy and as better players for the experience. But I think Georgie and the team laid a great platform last year. He's built a great culture amongst the team. They all love being amongst each other. And hopefully we're obviously playing finals this year and contending for a premiership.
And the other side that went quite quickly was how well represented we are in the under-19s across New South Wales and Queensland. The club has really built on the success in the Tasha Gale, as well as the recruitment of Fleur Jin from Rugby Union, who is repping the Queensland 19s.
Yeah, I think we've got 6 players running around.
Yes, correct. 6 players across the 2 squads. Yeah.
Jim, you sort of preempted the next question because I said last year the team had more victories than any other previous season. Should we entertain the idea of playing football, finals football this season?
I think that's certainly what we're aiming for. There's another year of experience in each of those players. It took a little while to build some cohesion, but again, whilst we've brought in some new faces, largely the core has been retained. And so they're going to play another season of footy again. They've had another preseason under their belt. I think the team, what really showed last year was the team reaped the rewards of the difficult preseason that Georgie put into them, as did BJ. From an athletic performance perspective, they've had another one of those preseasons this year, so I think they'll be even better prepared. And hopefully, if we stay relatively healthy, I can't see any reason why we won't be playing finals footy.
And one last question in the NRLW before we move on to investment in the West. But we've touched on this with Steve in the past, and we've spoken to him in various podcasts. But recruitment across NRL and NRLW isn't quite one-to-one. We know that development contracts aren't exactly the same in the NRLW as are in the NRL. So can you give us a quick rundown on the process being similar or different between the NRL and NRLW for recruitment and retention?
It's getting closer to becoming more similar given the prevalence of agents in the NRLW now.
Yeah.
Pretty much every player has representation, whereas a couple of years ago, many of them did not. So that obviously adds a layer of complexity to it. Obviously, the difference here is that there's some significant differences in that the women's game is still largely part-time. So the earning capacity of female players is obviously not as high as male players. You've got the overwhelming majority of players who are still holding down jobs or study to complement their footy. So that just presents a different dynamic. You're dealing with smaller rosters, so you've got squads of 24. The rules around your 4 development players being able to transition into the top squad are a little bit different to what they are from an NRL perspective as well. So that presents some different challenges when a player in your top 24 may go down as well. So there are some different challenges. You've also got new unique elements to the women's game that are simply a reality that need to be dealt with, including things like pregnancy leave. There's a number of players. I think we probably saw it with Millie Boyle. She missed last season, prominent player in the game, but she was at the stage of her life where she wanted to have children, and that'll continue to happen. So there's different challenges and nuances in the women's game that you have to be able to adapt to that you don't necessarily have in the men's. But everyone's becoming more experienced at it, and hopefully everyone will be better for the experience in the years to come.
Jim, we were going to finish up at 7:40. I've just been given an extra 5 minutes with you. If that's okay. So, as is always the case, our questions.
That's why we got all the big questions out of the way early on, so we could allow the ramble to go on a bit.
We will power through. So, next section's investment in the West. The return of the James Hardie as the Eels' principal commercial partner has been significant, because not only are they that major employer located in close to Parramatta itself, but they have featured on every single Eels premiership jersey. How pleasing was it for them to also recently come on board as the naming rights sponsor for the Centre of Excellence and Community Centre?
Yeah, look, really pleasing, Craig. We couldn't have asked more from Hardie's in the partnership. We actually had a really nice event last week to unveil the naming rights, where there was 20 or 30 people from James Hardie. We had a range of our staff involved as well. And both myself and their CEO, John, kind of made the observation that the thing that really makes this partnership come to life is how each organisation has welcomed the other into their own. It's just felt like such a natural partnership and relationship right from the start. Hardie's are making a generous investment in the club through their major partnership, but at every opportunity that we've put in front of them to potentially invest more, provide some more support to the club, they're always willing to identify how they can do that. And the naming rights is just one example. So they will be the naming rights partner for our Centre of Excellence and Community Centre for at least the next 4 years, which aligns with the tenure for the major partnership. And hopefully that partnership goes for many years beyond that. I know we both have very long-term plans for that. But they're a fantastic organisation. They're fantastic people. We've built a really strong connection in a short space of time. And I can see them providing even more support to the club in the years to come.
And then we'll take a fan question here quickly. This is another popular one in the context of third-party agreements. But how will the Parramatta Eels benefit from the multi-billion-dollar investment currently occurring in Parramatta? We know that the West is really blowing up in that regard. And without giving away anything, because, again, you can't lay down your cards here, but commercial and confidence, as it were, will it create opportunities for the club with third parties in particular, or anything beyond that?
I think the best way for me to answer that, John, is there's a great opportunity there for the club to expand its connection with the business network in Parramatta and Western Sydney. And obviously, as that becomes stronger, the opportunity becomes even greater. So our approach and our strategy is to maximize those relationships in whatever form they may come. And whether that comes through sponsorship, whether that comes through other opportunities that allows us to strengthen our football programs, it's incumbent on the club to make those relationships as strong as possible, to maximize the opportunities and then funnel those opportunities in the right way.
Jim, we're going to make this the last question. We had a whole lot of personal questions for you, and I'm sure you're disappointed that we're not getting to those tonight. Okay. But we will save that for another podcast, because we did want to ask you about, aspects to your role that surprise you, your favourite jersey. Is it possible for you to escape the pressures of being a CEO? But we will get that at another podcast. I want to finish it this way. First of all, this is for fan engagement, member engagement, access, that sort of thing. All those pre-season events were incredibly successful, Jim, and you would have been pleased with that. Will there be any in-season opportunities for more meet and greets with players? And then just to end it off, do you have a final message for Eels supporters and members?
Yeah, look, we are working through what the balance of our event calendar is going to look like, Craig. We will absolutely be running the same loyalty event that we did towards the back end of last year, which I think was really well received. And with full squad representation. So that's definitely on the agenda. And we're just working through some other possible sort of engagement opportunities. We've got a couple of other interstate ones that are coming up as well, interstate and regional ones that are also planned. And so I guess it's a watch this space in terms of further events. And then in terms of a final message, look, I know that the results haven't necessarily been what everyone would have hoped for. And the Parramatta fan base is an incredibly loyal and dedicated one. But what I would say is I'm really encouraged by the positivity and optimism that I've seen from the fans and members this year. And no one wants those close losses to turn into wins more than I do. Trust me. But I'm really sort of grateful for the patience that people are showing, and I guess the shared optimism that we have. There's no question that our club is going through change, and it's going through change that it needed to make. And hopefully we get further along that journey sooner rather than later. But I believe the changes that we've made are the right ones. There's further changes that will be made that will take us closer to where we want to be. But I couldn't be happier with the investment that we've made in Jason as a head coach. I think he's going to be an incredible head coach for this club. He's made an incredible contribution in building a culture within this organization that I think is going to stand the test of time and is the critical ingredient for us building long-term sustained success. So keep the faith, continue to turn out in numbers. And I guess hopefully those that fight, effort and pressure that you're seeing from the team is going to result in more wins and losses in the back end of the season and give us a really strong platform to build on in 2026 and beyond as well.
Well said, mate.
Sounds like some great hashtags too. Yeah. Fight, effort, pressure. We'll be going with those, Jim.
One last thing. New South Wales by how much tomorrow night, mate?
7.
7. Oh, spicy. I like that.
You're going for the field goal there.
Yes.
Jim, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We know you pressured there for time. We appreciate you extending it for a few minutes for us, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you, Jim.
No worries. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you. And thanks for your support, guys.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, bear with me now as I reorganize our settings because things have gone black. There we go. Craig is still here, don't worry, guys.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Got to drop this, bring up this one. There we go. We're back. We're so back. Thank you, chat, for all the great questions that we took on notice there too. Hope we were able to cover pretty much everything that everyone wanted. I know people always want the hard-hitting questions and answers, but bearing in mind that there's only so much that Jim can share in his role as CEO, I think he was pretty forthright with this, Craig. And we'll
look, I think so too. Who have we got there in chat tonight?
All the regulars are there. We've seen Chris Hill, also Chris as well, separate Chris, Dave Oz, Joel Justy. Who we got else in here? There's Aussie. You can see Aussie there. Michael Formosa, yep. Saw Josh in there earlier before as well. Leaps Above, sending love from Lennox Head, who reminded us that they had the great preseason segment there too, which is good feedback there for the club. Kicks is there as well. We got more and more here. We had well over 100 people watching at one point there, which is great. Gallagher was there earlier. I'm not sure he's still around, mate, but he was popping off earlier. Going well back now, Peter Zeb was there too. And guys, some of the questions that weren't asked, in particular in regards to fan engagement, I'm going to pass on to Craig because a reminder that he is part of the SGA, the Supporter Group Alliance, and there is a lot of stuff that he can do in that capacity in terms of fan engagement that more so than just having a question on the podcast. So
and can I just add in there, John? I did receive a number of questions from our listeners, our viewers, via DMs and on the various social platforms. And I said the same thing to a number of people.
Yeah.
Like, that'll be something that I will
won't feature on the podcast, but you'll take to the club directly.
Not to member council,
SGA,
to the supporter group.
Which
because it's not just Jim at those meetings. It's a number of Eels executives, people involved in planning events, in memberships, as well as Jim, as well as the media team. So there's a whole lot that has to come together for different aspects of fan engagement. So any ideas that people have, don't ever hesitate to send it through, because where the Supporter Group Alliance is meant to be the voice of support,
connecting fans to the club, exactly. So member.
So your ideas are absolutely welcome. So never hesitate to send an idea through. They'll be raised in the meetings, because we collate that sort of information to take to the meetings, and then we help set the agenda for the meetings. And they're 2-hour meetings that we have, so we do get the time to raise different ideas that have been put forward by members. John, I think we're just about due for your musical interlude.
We're going to restructure the podcast, guys. We'll go to the interlude now, then into the news quickly, because podcast has been running for a bit now. But Michael Formosa, our good mate, taking us to task. Why didn't you ask when you can guarantee us a premiership? That's a great question. But yeah, I think Jim did a good job sort of stressing the difficulties that face all clubs there in terms of getting things right and wrong, and how much sort of, I suppose, buffer there is for errors, which is a big part of running an NRL club, isn't it? It's minimising the errors because they're going to happen. But yeah, no, I don't.
And can I also emphasise as well that we spoke informally with Jim at the start of the year about having a chat on the podcast, and this was actually then initiated by Jim and the club to come in on the podcast this week, because it hasn't been something that we chase up all the time, because our schedule's busy all the time, and so this was a great opportunity. Like, we were really, really pleased that Jim had made himself available right at that midpoint of the season to review what's happened so far, and we couldn't have been happier with the timing with that, because let's face it, if we talked to Jim at the start of the season, we're sort of looking at what might be, more than anything else. And, there's always a lot of optimism about the season and what have you. Mid-season, we're able to, I think, realistically reflect on things that have happened so far and to get takes on what's gone right, what hasn't gone so right in the season so far. And I think we've seen what's happened in terms of the roster reshaping already. So I think it ended up being a great time for us to be able to do this podcast with Jim. So, John, your musical interlude.
Yeah, so this week, again, I was trying to find something interesting, and I've gone for a rearrangement of a rock classic, and by a YouTuber called Sayo Kamada, I believe it is, Sayo space Komada, a very talented musician on YouTube who's done a rearrangement of Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle on the Japanese shamisen, not their guitar, but like their sort of guitar-esque instrument. So this was one that I enjoyed, and hopefully you guys did too. Just make sure it works right. There we go. Interesting to see her recreate the reverb of the electric guitar with an acoustic instrument. So very talented there, and a bit of good fun there. And hopefully doesn't get us copyright struck. So please YouTube algorithm, please don't strike us down. But yeah, we move on to the NRL and Parramatta news, and I'll take control of this one, 60, since we haven't really got a well thought out run sheet here. And we start in Parradise with the Team List Tuesday, I suppose, probably the best place to start. And we've got 3 teams named this week, mate. Eels taking on the Titans on Sunday, 6:15 p.m. out at Combank Stadium. Of course, we'll be there live for the pregame. More details to come there in terms of our guest and what time we'll be scheduled for, but Craig will have you cover that one later. But we start here with the Eels, and it's unfortunately a weakened team. We knew that Mitchell Moses and Dylan Brown would be out because of a calf strain sustained by our halfback at the New South Wales Blues camp, and some, well, I suppose bullshit for Dylan Brown, copping a ridiculous charge. And the club probably did the right thing not fighting, because that feels like they would have lost and had to cop a second game there. But Jason Ryles, his hands cuffed here. And what's he done, Craig? Well, he's made a couple of changes. As expected, Dean Hawkins has come into the halfback role, played fantastically in his last NRL start against the Manly Seagulls with 4 try assists. But he's going to partner, I'll say surprise, but this is a player that people have been chomping at the bit to see get a more featured role here, and it's Josh Papali, who gets his first look as a starting half for the Parramatta Eels and gets to be the first player perhaps to really press their claims to be the post-Dylan Brown option for 2026. But going through the rest of the team here, Isaiah Yongi is the fullback. Zach Lomax is expected to back up from State of Origin with the benefit of that Sunday turnaround, with Josh Adokar on the other flank. Will Penasini and Sean Russell are in the centres. We got the halves, as mentioned before, Papali and Hawkins. Front row was Jack Williams, Riley Smith, and Junior Barlaw. Back row, Kelma Tuolangi, Kitione Ogidian Katonga, and Jermaine Hopgood. Dylan Walker is on the bench as the first man there. Matt Dury, Wiramu Greg, and Jordan Samrani. A bit of confusion about the status of Ryan Madison. We'll get to that shortly. He has been named in New South Wales Cup, but also been named on the injury report, so we have to get to the bottom of that one. But the extended roster, Joey Lussick, Charlie Geimer, Dan Keir, Ronald Volkman, and Samuel Luizu, taking on the Gold Coast Titans, obviously, who come off a win against Manly, fittingly, given that we talked about Dean Hawkins and his outstanding game against the Seagulls. But a couple of changes there, 60s, enforced by injury and suspension, and the unclear status of Ryan Madison, which we're going to have to wait and see, because he's been named on both the injury report and the New South Wales Cup team list, and I don't know how that really works.
John, first couple of observations. I have watched Joash train in the 5'8" role in the last couple of weeks, but that was more, I think, in the main instance, he was filling in for Dylan, who I think might have been having some cramp problems or what have you in a session, and then he just sort of sat out the rest of the session, and we saw Joash jump in and play that 5'8" role while Dylan watched from the sideline. And you know what? He looked good. Like, he looked really good in that session. Looked quite natural playing on that left side. But, you know, it's a far cry from what it might be at training to a game with all of the pressures, and also where you have someone alongside you in the halfback role who's also come up from Cup in that game. Now, you mentioned Dean Hawkins in his form in first grade this year. That last performance that he had for the Eels he was arguably man of the match in that game. It was probably a career best performance from Dean. You couldn't have asked for anything more of him in that halfback role. It's just, you know, it feels like it was a very Eels thing to have happen, that both an injury to Mitch Moses and the most absurd suspension.
Oh my God.
Of Dylan Brown.
It makes you upset just reflecting on it, doesn't it? That
you know what? I don't want to, John. Like, it's I think most NRL fans, unless they're people that particularly hate Parramatta, but I guess there might even be some of those that look at that and they go, what the hell is the game coming to in this instance? Like, what on earth is it coming to? Everyone knows there's referees have to be protected. Everyone knows that, you know, you can't have players putting hands on refs or even, going up and getting in their face.
And like we said,
you.
it weakens the value of the contrary conduct charge by making these sort of allegations, but charges in the MRC and the judiciary. Because, as you said, as much as we grumble about referees, players and fans have to have an absolute bare minimum level of respect for the officials that should never be crossed. And that's what the contrary conduct is for the players. But to then charge Dylan Brown with that, I don't know. And
it was the grading too, wasn't it? Like, wasn't it like a grade 2 or something?
Good question. I don't know on notice here, but yeah, 1 to 2 games
to get that 1 game suspension.
While all the Dogs players got fines for their matters of foul play or whatnot. It's like, what are we doing here? What are we trying to police anyway? We keep moving, mate.
The only thing I'm going to mention is the surprise with Wiremu Greg.
Now, what's the story?
Now, there are, of course, a lot of middles that are out.
A lot,
But this is Wiremu's, it's his first appearance for the season,
First appearance for the season, yeah. And he's coming off a 2-game suspension. But in saying that, he actually probably played close to his best game of football in the game he eventually got suspended from as a result of. So, interesting call. Hard to read or hard to gauge whether this is a forced selection, whether this is a reward for a guy that's managed to turn things around to some capacity, and I guess maybe he's impressed on the training paddock. We don't know. We're not in a position to be able to give you that information, unfortunately. Not like we're withholding, we just don't know.
But, John, then when you go on and you read that injury report and you just go, this is ridiculous proportions.
Yeah, it is 9 players on the injury report this week. And some of them we knew. Some of them explain why the New South Wales Cup team was so weak last week. But, of course, Mitchell Moses topping it, Craig, half injury. Expected round 20 is his expected return, which may be optimistic there. We're in round 16 right now, which means we play this week in round 16, play round 17, bye in round 18, I believe. Then we come out of that, play round 19, and he's back for round 20. So we'd miss 3 games, which is a pretty good outcome if that's the case, honestly. But we know how tricky that has been for him to manage. So you can't be overly optimistic about that round 20 date, and you sort of have it in the back of your mind that maybe it might be pushed back a week or 2, but we have to wait and see. Clarity on Luca Moretti. You mentioned that it was an ankle injury in a podcast prior 60s. You are correct. Round 19 to 20 is his expected due date return. And then we've got a host of other guys now. Richie Penasini, hand, to be confirmed. Bowie Simonson, foot, round 19, we knew this. Sam Tuivasa, ankle, round 19, we knew this. Ryan Madison, spine, to be confirmed. Like, you cannot put out an injury report saying spine to be confirmed and like leave us going like what? So Madison named in the Cup team, I believe, but also on the injury report for spinal injury. Jake Tungle, hip round 19 to 20. Will Latu, looks like it's a minor MCL sprain his 60s because he's due back next week. So a grade 1 MCL, I would guess there, which is obviously a good outcome in terms of knee injuries. And of course, the most unfortunate of them all is Artie Miller-Stephen with that knee injury that's wiped him out for the entire year. So it's an exhaustive list here on the injury report, ladies and gentlemen, and sort of indicative of what we're seeing in the Cup here, where we've had a host of Flegg and RMC players being called upon in recent weeks. And Kalis, is, to his credit, is doing a pretty good job. But, mate, we are low on troops right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's obviously now reflected in the New South Wales Cup.
Correct. Who play that curtain raiser at CommBank on Sunday. They've got a host of those RMC and Flegg players featured this week, starting at fullback with Arpa Twiddle. And then you got Liam Scolari on one wing, Samuel Louisa on the other, Araz Nava and Bo Newlands in the centres. So explains why Richard Penasini was absent last week and this week. Hopefully that hand injury's not too bad though. Matthew Hunter gets another crack at 5'8", and he'll partner Ronald Volkman. Front row, provisionally, it's Ryan Madison and Tony Mattielli, but we have to wait and see what's happening with Matto. If he does not go, I'd expect Brock Parker or Kane Kalachi to start, and they'd bring in maybe, again, assuming that they're fit, Max Tupou or one of the other young forwards that's been in the mix there. Back row.
Well, Brock and Kane were the starting props last week.
Yeah. So, but once if one of them was promoted, you'd have a spot in the bench to fill, and I'd expect that to be Max Tupou or someone similar. Maybe Damascus comes back up. He got his debut last week and did okay. But in the back row, we've got Joe Lussick as dummy half with Tony Mattielli returning from suspension there, the partner Madison provisionally. But a young player that continues to get a look in the Cup, which is great to see, is Tyrese Lakini. He starts on the edge this week with Dan Keir on the other side, Charlie Geimer at lock forward. Brendan Hands, Brock Parker, Saxon Pryke and Kane Kalachi round out that interchange. But this is very much a team that is subject to change, mate, given what we know, what we don't know with Ryan Madison. And I suppose some of those other positions too. Could be a bit of volatility in that team still.
Well, last week I had it said to me when I arrived out at Kellyville, when you see the numbers run out, mate, it's going to look like Lotto. So
some of the 20s and 30s
because the numbers were starting to get a bit bigger.
Yeah, all the way up to 45, whatever it is when they do those balls.
It didn't quite get up into the 30s or 40s, but yeah, there was a few 20s there that were named.
As Chad's pointing out, no Alfred Smalley. He's facing a 5 to 6 week suspension, I believe. I think the details came out today. He got it wrong, trying to come in and crack Tane Tuapiki, and I believe he was saying that it was head-to-head contact that he made. Nathan Kales came out and explained what had been said. Kale also said that he was close to the NRL, which is interesting to hear. But he's been okay for the Cup team, but he's going to be on the sideline for at least a month plus there. And it's unfortunate he got it wrong because he made a great hit earlier in that game where he got it right. But Tuapiki was a smaller target and he didn't lower the contact area.
Yep. Now that takes us on to the other team that's had a lot of volatility in terms of team list, which is the Jersey Flegg.
Yeah, and they've got a couple of changes this week, not too bad. They also welcome back a player. Jaden Ambici is their fullback. Muhammad Al-Madine and Bradley Avery are on the flanks. Tavaka Palu is back, or at least has been named to return. That's a big boost for the centre position. He'll work the left edge, I believe, with Antioch Vitala should be reverting to the right now. Lorenzo Talatino, who, big scoop for TCT there, Jim Sarantinos mentioned, has been retained long-term. He'll start alongside Joshua Lynn in the halves. Damascus Nemia and Tiankan Brown, both of whom have got a bit of taste of Cup football this year, are the starting bookends alongside Jack Hudson at dummy half. Dom Stratus and Will Lewis and the back row, Yeti Samuelu at lock forward. Then on the interchange, you've got Paddy Spence, Tom Summer, Ryder Talangi and Bo Lucian. And then a sighting of another SG Ball graduate, 60s as the reserve this week, Trace Beattie, getting his, not into the team proper, but a foot in the door there. No Lachlan Koinakis, who actually did a pretty good job, I thought, last week. So not sure if he's picked up some sort of injury or niggle. Unfortunately, we don't get those sort of injury reports for the Flegg, and there's usually that sort of context there.
I can confirm that I was talking to Raf Destratus last week, so he's got a bit of a neck injury, so he's probably going to be about 3 or 4 weeks.
There you go.
Still the game. So
yeah, there's some context there to the injury situation, but still a good-looking team there for the Eels and for Jordan Rankin, and they'll be looking to bounce back. They let a game slip against the Warriors, Craig, and we'll talk about this in the preview podcast, obviously in depth, but it's a good team. They should play better football than what they did last week, and hopefully the returns of Tavaka Palu helps there, alongside getting Damascus and Will Lewis back.
That's what I say every week, John. You know, with that momentum turn where it was just it happens every week. They give their opponents
there was
a
a
sniff.
loose ball in the end goals, didn't ground it, and it cost them. It was a 12-point swing. And I see chats asking about a few players. Where's Chris Petrus? Where's Isaac Jim? Again, could be a case of injuries, guys. Could be a case of just managing these players. Have had a long season because their preseason and season started late last year, and they've been.
John, I think it is. I think it is getting into that realms of roster management as well, because they've got a lot of players who are now in that squad that are deserving of time in the games, and trying to juggle that with players who had been not just doing the job but excelling at the job, with having the team up in the top four. So you've got talented players pushing up, and then you've got the talent that's in there that has the team placed up near the top of the table. So, it's a matter of a little bit of juggling in a way that's not disruptive to the team, I guess. Yep. So that's why we've seen a player here and there from SG Ball make their debut. And they might be there for just a week, and then another player makes their debut the week after. That's literally what we've been seeing. It's almost like taking turns at making a debut for the flag.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, and injuries will be a factor in that too, but I wouldn't overthink it, guys. If you're wondering why Petrus or Jim aren't available, it could be a case of roster management, could be a case of a niggle. It's not anything malicious. They'll be back into the flag at some point in the future, and especially as some of those guys filter up into the New South Wales Cup around them. In terms of other Parramatta news, as we move on, 60s, we obviously let off the show with it, but Bryce Cartwright having departed with the Eels. Jim Sarantinos gave a great rundown about the nature of the split and how it was amicable, and Bryce is returning to his roots there at St. Mary's, which is good to hear. But Bryce Cartwright, I think you can look back on his time as a Parramatta Eel quite positively, can't you, 60s? He did some fantastic things for the club. Brad Alpha certainly helped him resurrect his career, and while it didn't end up with a great tilt at a premiership, unfortunately, but it's suffice to say, I think that Bryce Cartwright was a pretty quality Parramatta Eel when all things are said and done.
Yeah, so you look and you go, did that player add value during their time at the club? And I think for certainly those first 3 years of his contract, most definitely. And it might have been a little bit of a struggle this year where he just couldn't crack it in first grade. Who knows what might have been if he had a run in first grade this season. But if you look at the entirety of his time, he had some highlight moments during his years at Parramatta. But more than that, I thought he developed during his time there. And I'd say especially I thought 2023 might have been his best season. But, he developed a consistency in his game.
Absolutely.
That hadn't been there
a toughness
before.
And consistency that had been absent in his sort of wander through the NRL prior to that. And I think you reflect back on his career as an Eel quite positively. So well done to Bryce Cartwright. Best luck in your future endeavours, mate, honestly. I mean that sincerely. And we continue to move on, mate. Quick recap of the news we mentioned in a previous podcast, but the games have been featured this week, I believe. But New South Wales and Queensland have Eels repping in the 19s men and women's games. And for the men's, Josiah Funariuta, the lone representative for the grand final SG Ball team, in a squad that is littered, admittedly, with Jersey flag talent. And I think that's been the big factor there. But a worthy selection there for Josiah. Lorenzo Talatina, damn unlucky to miss out SG Ball Player of the Year, not for the Parramatta Eels, but for the competition. But he had a couple of genuine stars ahead of him in Mitchell Woods and Toby Rodwell. But again, surprised didn't even throw him the number 14 there, 60s. But he's carving up in the Jersey flag, and he'll be, I suppose, in pursuit of higher aspirations in the New South Wales 19s jersey.
Well, you know what? We caught up with AJ from the league scene and from Bar Sports. He was talking about that team selection, and yet he acknowledged that, pretty tough for Lorenzo to not have made the team. But he's also a bloke who's seen a lot of the grade this year with those 19s players. And I guess how some of them, there might be some of them there that were flag as well, off the top of my head, that shone there. He just said, look, it was a really tough job with that selection. You know, a lot of talent in specific positions where, a lot of talent that missed out on selection.
Yeah, and
in certain
Rob
positions.
Woods, the starting halves, have been playing flag and cup this year. So that is a measure of how high the bar is. And as Chris in chat is saying, how did he not make the bench? That's my gripe there, is that he really would have been a fantastic pickup at 14 for the Blues, but there's probably another player there that was worthy selection too. So unfortunately for the SG Ball Eels, only the one rep there. But
I'll tell you what,
Josiah's a pretty handy rep.
Josiah.
He's having himself a year, not a season, because he's played across multiple grades now, a year. So hopefully he can have a big game there for the Blues. But on the other side of the ledger, 60s, Eels repping for Queensland and New South Wales in the 19s women's game. We mentioned Fleur Jin for Queensland. We picked her up from Rugby Union, and she's been fast-tracked into that Queensland program, which is awesome. I get a quick look at her before the NRLW. And then on the New South Wales side of the ledger, Riverley Arlo, Kylea Gray, Ava Jones, Tess McWilliams, and Fontaine Tafua all been picked in the 20-player squad. We have to wait and see how many go into the actual game day 17. But, geez, there's some talent in those 5 players there. We've spoken with Steve Georgalis in that I think Arlo, Gray, it's Arlo, McWilliams, and Tafua all have NRLW development contracts now.
Yeah. And, John, we spoke about this with the Tasha Gale team taking out the title, that there were so many Eels players that made both the 17s and 19s in the girls city team, and by contrast, virtually nobody from the Bulldogs. And it highlighted the fact that this dominant club in the Bulldogs that couldn't make the grand finals was largely an imported team. And the Eels, in contrast, they won the titles playing football, like just being great pathways footballers, playing great football. And they've been rewarded with their selection in this team. I'm really looking forward to seeing that, because people that are watching this, you're getting a taste of who is feeding into the NRLW team.
Yep.
The standard of player that's feeding into it. So the exciting thing about the Women's Rugby League, John, is that we see every year that the women's game at that senior level is getting stronger. But in covering the Pathways Rugby League, we're seeing what's on its way through. And it's just phenomenal. The sort of football that's being played now in Pathways Rugby League by the girls, if you cast your mind back, like 6-7 years ago.
2018, I believe it was, when we were watching Tasha Gale back then. And, you cannot believe it is the same system, the same pathways, the same competition. And it's a credit to all the clubs and all the players involved that it's come on so fast without compromising anything. And it's great. Yeah. And to catch those games, guys, 5:45 p.m. for the ladies and 7:45 p.m. for the fellas on Thursday. Catch it on 9 Now, KO, and Foxtel. So be sure to tune into that one, because there'll be plenty to get out of that.
Looking forward to that.
I think, guys, chat, I don't know if there's anything I've missed for Parramatta. It's been a pretty quiet week. We talked about the Mitchell Moses injury, how unfortunate that is. Obviously, Bryce Cartwright. But we're coming out of the bye, so there's not that much to talk about, I don't think.
John, I think the only thing that I did want to mention as well was that the Eels Foundation had a great function last
correct, the long
Friday.
Lunch. Yeah, the long lunch. Yeah, yep. Good shout.
Yeah, the long lunch. So we will do a little bit of a special podcast with the Eels Foundation. So we just work out a date that we're doing that, and we'll get everyone up to date with it. But the feedback that I've had from about the function itself was how much people enjoyed it. I think there were well over, I think the last number I heard was something like 550 people.
Wow, huge turnout.
That booked in for that. And, when you've got such legends of Parramatta all there in the one at the one event, and then of course you've got the current coaches of Jason Riles, Nathan Brown, who were there to add their thoughts on what's happening this season so far and field questions. Look, I wish I was at the event, to be honest, John. It was a bit tough for me to get to this year, but I've put it forward to the club about different ways that they can maybe make contributions to the foundation maybe a little bit more accessible for the average person. I like the idea of being able to, just like your normal membership, maybe being able to opt in for an extra foundation add-on, which could maybe then contribute towards attendance at some of these events. I think there's ways that you can work around these sorts of things, especially if something like that becomes an annual event. There's people enjoy being able to meet legends of the game. People enjoy being able to hear their opinions. People enjoy being able to meet current players, current coaches, that sort of thing. So, and especially in what was a relaxed atmosphere, I believe, because it wasn't like a formal occasion. I think it was pretty casual there at Rose Hill. So, I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more about it. And hopefully, as I said, it's something that becomes an annual event and maybe becomes a little bit more accessible for the average punter.
Yep, good shout there, mate. Yes, I think that
any
wraps up.
major NRL news? Oh, obviously Manly.
Oh, Chris is saying it was good to meet you on the weekend, 60s, but he's got to run off.
Oh, look, Chris came and introduced himself to me at the lower grade games. Also got a little bit more educated after that game because we learnt a little bit about the replacement rule. So there was a little bit of conjecture, just to give you some context, and for the people listening to have some context. There was a timeout that wasn't blown in one of the games where the try was scored just before that last 5 minutes. So then when the kick was taken, there'd been the clock had ebbed away, quite a number of seconds. And then a little bit after that, another try was scored and time off was blown immediately. And
why is there a difference in the
why
clock?
is there a difference? And basically it's all about that last 5 minutes.
Yes.
If it's scored inside that last 5 minutes, then that time off is blown immediately. If it's not, then it's the standard, as it is throughout the rest of the match, the standard time that you get to take a kick, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, good stuff there. Okay, let's move on to NRL news quickly.
It was great to meet Chris, and AJ was down on the sideline as well as Chris, and So, John, each week, and I've said this to you before, I get probably about 6, 7, 8 people come up and introduce themselves, and man, that makes my day when people come up and say good day. It really does.
Talk footy and talk TCT. It's great.
Yeah,
it really is. It's always humbling as well, because literally just a couple of bozos yapping about Parramatta here on the podcast, and the fact that we can actually give people some form of entertainment is hilarious. And
of course, the other thing too is we hid our faces for so long, John, because we were just we used to talk about it and just say, oh, look, it's probably good that people don't know our faces. You just lurk around in anonymity, and but you know what? Just being able to meet more people, has made putting our ugly mugs on the screen worth it. So again, thank you to Chris, thank you to everyone that's been coming up and saying good day. I really do appreciate it.
And we now move into the NRL. Chats are all over this, but there's been some corpo speak out of Manly that Seabold has 2 games to turn things around, while Tommy Tebojevic has been moved to the centres. Look, if you've got 2 games to turn things around, the next thing you're hearing is you've got the full support of the board. He is a dead man walking. 2 games is nothing to turn things around. So Manly,
no, that's like saying get your get your desk in order, gather your personal belongings.
Yeah, exactly.
And be ready to vacate the premises.
It's just a fire drill, mate. Just we need you to go to the car park, and we're going to change the locks. Yeah. So Manly, look, they are low key in a state of crisis, aren't they? DCE, there seems to be some sort of split behind the scenes. Obviously, he's leaving, but there is some sort of cultural rift there at the club. Seabold is not getting the best out of the playing group. Tom Tebojevic and his future at the club is up in the air. You can't pay him marquee money anymore because the man does not turn up consistently in terms of just availability. So very interesting to see.
What's that saying, John? The best ability is availability.
Yeah, baby. Separation, the preparation. All those sports truisms, they're there for a reason. And
can we throw another one in there? Has Seabold lost the dressing sheds?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's definitely one that could go into the context of this discussion. And now we just wait and see. Manly very much a hotbed of activity now. Potentially a new coach, or almost certainly a new coach. Could be a lot of roster movement there. Hey, Parramatta Eels are on the lookout for player acquisition. Could Manly be an option now? Who knows? Have to wait and see. There are
John. How are they going in the lower grades?
Good shout there. Let me pull up the New South Wales Rugby League very quickly.
Because you start to talk about whole of club.
Yeah.
So performance
in the cup. Well, in the cup, they're third last, 5 wins, 9 losses. So not doing too flash there. In the Jersey Flag, they are third last, 4 wins, 10 losses. So Manly, they're in a bit of a hole right now.
I don't think their junior reps teams were particularly high performing either.
SG Ball, they were second last. Harold Matthews, they were 6.
They just qualified.
They snuck into the finals. 6. 5 wins. Alongside Eels, Rabbitohs, Roosters, Central Coast Roosters, and Seagulls, all 5 wins. So 5-8 was tied together by 4 and against. So
But apart from Harold Matt, man, they've. I mean, look, John. Let's be honest. Have they got some talent in their first grade team that other clubs would want? Yes, some. But are they functioning as a unit? No. And are some of those players, as you alluded to now with Tommy Turbo, just not able to contribute at an elite level anymore? So, and I mean, where do you see Jake Turbo?
Yeah, well, you know my opinions on Jake. So I think if Manly are fair dinkum about moving on and establishing a sort of line in the sand, there's some tough decisions to make in terms of their personnel there. And it's I mean, it's obvious that they've made the decision that the coach is about to go, right? Now, there was talk about that it might be Michael Ennis that they'd target to come in and be the coach. Do you think that job, like we just ran through where the lower grades are sitting, and how certain players are performing, would you bring in a rookie coach and go, he'll get the job done? And look, Ennis is a very raw rookie coach too. It's not like Jason Riles.
That's what we should. And I mean, look, people might go Jason Riles rookie coach, but you know the depth of the apprenticeship.
Yeah,
across
the Roosters in Melbourne for nearly a decade, whereas Ennis has dipped his toes into the specialist and assistant coaching ranks in recent years, but he is a media pundit first and foremost. So I don't know.
Yeah, and one of the things that he wouldn't be involved in this specialist coaching role is the planning for a season,
which is the big thing.
The overseeing of other coaches,
your logistical management, your ability to handle attrition, which is
all that sort of stuff.
It's the grind of the NRL that gets you. It's getting guys up for a singular game. A lot of coaches, whether they're talented or not, can do that. But managing your roster, managing the club for essentially 52 weeks a year, like there is no time off as an NRL coach, really.
If you're Manly, surely logic dictates that you would be looking for an experienced coach, one that's not carrying too much baggage as well.
Chat's mentioning Brad Arthur. There is a connection there between the management or the ownership in Brad Arthur, and that could be a viable solution too. So definitely something to watch there.
If I was Brad Arthur, I wouldn't be going there.
No,
because
but he does have a connection there with his time.
He's got a connection there. He's and look, I don't think he'd want the connection with his own son there, because of the fact that, like, Jake left because, like, Eels fans were just horrible towards Jake. Let's be honest. But he also had two players ahead of him who weren't going to be dislodged for a while, or didn't look like it. I mean, surprise, surprise with Dylan. But, Jake moved on. I think it was a wise decision that Jake made to move on. Not in the short term, it wasn't, because if he had stayed there, he would have got a lot more first grade, because we ended up with Dylan Brown suspended for that lengthy period of time. And then I think we had some injuries with Moses as well. So he probably would have got a lot of first grade if he had stayed at the Eels. But anyway, that's all in the past. I don't think it'd be a wise move for Brad. If I'm Brad, there's two things. Number one, he's been very successful over in England at the moment. The Leeds team's running, up near the top of the table. The reports are he's loving his coaching over there. They want him to extend. If I was him, I'd extend for another year there and see what opportunities do present themselves. Because if I'm him coming back to the NRL, I don't want to go back to a club where I'm on hiding, to get the job done. There's a 3 to 5 year rebuild for Manly sitting there, I reckon.
It is not a small job. And
because you look at their halves, right? DCE's moving on. Jamal Fogarty's coming in. Jamal's
good,
an advanced
player,
age.
but he is not a young player. He is there for a season or two, maybe, in terms of prime, not even prime football, but quality football. So crazy.
Yep. Anyway, any other major NRL news?
Look, there is something we will talk about next podcast, maybe. But there's been an escalation in the beef or feud between Aaron Woods and Billy Slater today. Evidently, Billy Slater. I'm not fully abreast of the situation. I don't want to make any comments, like in depth. But evidently, Billy Slater's invoked Paul Green in a response to what was a bit of just an origin beef from Aaron Woods calling Slater a grub originally, and there's been a bit of a fallout from that, given the unfortunate circumstances surrounding Paul Green, understandably, and also Billy Slater's history. I think he sledged Corey Patterson back in the day about mental health. So there's people piling on from left and right. I don't want to make an uninformed comment here, Craig, but definitely something to monitor moving forwards. There's some spiciness to this Origin match tomorrow, it looks like.
John, with Aaron Woods weighing in, I was thinking that it was nothing more than The Rock or Stone Cold or someone doing a bit of work.
Got a bit of promo work exactly for the game. I thought, because it's been a pretty tame Origin series, that was my response. My gut feel was Woods is out here trying to just spark a bit of heat, get a bit of rivalry kicked off here. But evidently he struck a nerve with Billy Slater, and things have gotten pretty ugly pretty quickly.
Oh, surely Billy's been around long enough. And
there is no way that he wasn't a chirper on the field too. Exactly, that Slater wasn't a chirper on the field too. So I don't know. Yeah. Hopefully they can somehow salvage the situation, because it's gotten pretty ugly based on what I'm seeing here as I sort of read through while we're broadcasting.
Maybe those two, after the series is over, need to take inspiration from Sonny Bill and
put the gloves on.
Paul Gallen, put the gloves on, jump in the ring.
Bit of a difference of weight classes there, but I'm sure we can find a handicap there.
Well, look, the other thing too about Aaron Woods is apparently if New South Wales lose, he has to nude up on the beach at Bondi.
Oh God!
So it's and I think if New South Wales win, it's Carl Stefanovic that has to nude up on Bondi.
Jesus, no one wins. No one wins there. Other major story today, 60s, South Sydney in their move to Allianz Stadium has been rejected by the state government, who are the rights holders to both those stadiums there. It's in the New South Wales Trust, the Stadium Trust. So what now for South Sydney? They've got
what's the basis of them being rejected?
It's a good question. Again,
I mean, I don't understand how that works. Why don't
they're in a contract with a core stadium, right? I guess. And
so there's if there's a look, I can understand it if there's a contract situation that isn't beneficial to the stadium management.
They're
right?
locked into 2031 at a core, but so that's the groundwork here.
So,
but the South PR side of things in the article was saying that they signed that contract extension on the provision that they understood that Accor would get a renovation and upgrade, and it has since been left out of all the stadium splurging that's been going on by the state government, even though Accor's not exactly a second-rate facility. But they've been told they can now play 2 or 3 matches a year at the Moore Park venue, which is, of course, Allianz, the Sydney Football Stadium. But they want to make the wholesale move there. Man, South Sydney is such a weird club in terms of their home ground, isn't it? Because they don't really have one, do they? Like when you think about it.
It's interesting because I'm sure when they made that move to Accor all those years ago, the rationale was that the majority of the South Sydney supporters lived in Western Sydney.
Yeah.
Like they were saying they were moving it closer to where the heartland of their supporters
it was a ridiculous statement back then, and it's a ridiculous statement now.
Yep. So now, are they abandoning those supporters who they were moving their games to before? Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too in terms
Very
of
much
this sort of
case of that,
demographic argument, geographical argument. Look, to me, John, the way that I see it is, are the Roosters entitled to have that ground entirely to themselves? Well, historically, the Sydney Sports Ground was the Roosters' home ground, and Redfern Oval was South's home ground. Redfern Oval doesn't exist as a first-grade venue anymore. So, the closest geographical stadium to that is, of course, is Allianz. So I believe that Souths have, they certainly have the right to be heard, have the right to be their requests seriously entertained. And I don't know, did that rebuild happen, exclusively for the Roosters? Well, I guess they can say that no, Sydney FC play there, Rugby Union play there. So look, there's probably arguments to be had in favour of all sides there. I think it's probably a case of the Rabbitohs made their bed in making that long-term deal.
Yeah.
Now, it's probably up to them.
Yeah.
It is a risk. It's up to them whether they want to try to argue it legally. I doubt that they will.
No.
I think and you know what? I think if they're playing a limited number of games per season at Allianz, it's a good lead into moving back there. And then they can plan around, like the big return. Like they keep having these 3 or 4 games each year there, and then bang, the big season launch of the return to their, what's supposed to be their home territory. Maybe they're concerned as well that the Roosters are winning the hearts of the people that live over that way at this flash new stadium, where they, to be fair, since that stadium's open, the Roosters have had some pretty good crowds turning up to watch them.
True.
Like no one can point the finger at the Roosters now and say you haven't got supporters.
Yeah,
and it's not
the
and it's
Tricolours
not
are turned up. Yeah, I agree.
And it's not as if it's what you would call bandwagon support, where the team is. It's not like the team's flying high on the top of the table, and everyone's just turning up to watch a team that's flying high, like maybe 1 or 2 other clubs have in recent times. So all power to the Roosters fans.
Yeah, well said.
Anything else, John, or
there's a stack of injury news across the code. South Sydney have been hit pretty hard. They're one of the teams that have really rivaled us for a cursed injury run this year.
They'll all be back in time for our game.
Oh, no doubt they'll be back and at full fitness for us. That's just a given. But beyond that, Ricky Stewart's son is making his NRL debut. Jed Stewart, I believe. Good bit of...
Is it Jed or Jeb?
Good
Jed
shout.
or Jeb?
I thought it was Jed with a D. But let me have a quick gander at the Warriors Panthers.
You're probably right.
It is D for Delta, Jed Stewart. So he makes his debut
mate,
against the
old
Tigers.
age, my hearing's going.
Look, D's and B's, it's just a mirrored thing. It's fine. But yeah, he makes his debut and continues the legacy there for the Raiders and for the Stewart family. So well done there. And Ricky's obviously a polarizing character, but that's a nice bit of NRL news there. Beyond that,
I've softened on my attitude towards Ricky.
Look, when he's in Canberra, he's a Canberra guy. So, obviously he left the Eels in the lurch. And in that sort of scope, you can be upset. But, we've spoken.
If he knew the truth about Parramatta and where we were heading in the salary cap, would you blame him?
Yeah, exactly. You talk about rats bending, sinking ships, but that was something else, wasn't it? So if he had any inkling of what was happening there, don't blame him for getting out. And, we chat with Quint, a good friend of the show and a former co-host, and he's got plenty of positive things to say about Ricky from interactions, sort of person to person from his time at the Eels. And
I've spoken to some people who know him, and whilst I've also heard stories that go the other way, a lot of people have got time for him, and you know what, as you said, he's at the club he wants to be at, so I'm not going to begrudge someone coaching a club that they're passionate about. They're flying high this year too, John.
Yeah, I have been waiting for them to sort of not flop. Like, I think they were still going to be good, but I was waiting for them to be exposed a little bit against some of the better teams in the competition. But they've found that gear, and they're playing.
They're in it. They're in it up to their
Sevilio
necks,
Tamale's been injured is a loss. He's been fantastic for a rookie. I really liked him when I saw him in the New South Wales 19s last year. That was a great pickup by them. They did lose their recruitment guy to the Roosters, though. So the guy that's been behind a lot of that really good work they've done, identifying young players and sort of going out there and building a team that way, is defected to the Tricolour. So a big pickup there for the Roosters. Be interesting to see how Canberra managed to sort of continue that recruitment strategy in the wake of it. So I'm just trying to read in chat. Okay. So Chris is saying that there's something about ARL commissioners being able to refer players to the judiciary if it was missed by the MRC. That's pretty wild. Okay. Well, I haven't got the dates on that, Chris, but we'll keep an eye on that one, because that is very interesting about the sort of executive authority to be able to refer a player directly. And I suppose that sort of ties in with some of the stuff we've seen from, not this year because he doesn't do them anymore, but Graham Annesley talking about the dissenting opinions from head office compared to what the MRC has been citing in years gone by. Wow. If that's true, that's definitely something to talk about in the future podcast. And I have to wait.
Sorry, what's that, John?
Chris is saying there was a Fox story that the ARL Commission has invoked powers to be able to cite a player for charges if the MRC has missed it or done something that they didn't agree with, which is pretty rogue. But I haven't got.
They're invoking an executive power.
Yeah, like a what's it called? A emergency
presidential command,
a state of war or emergency invocation of powers. I haven't got a citation on that. I'm just going what Chris is saying here.
The opposite of a presidential pardon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when the president invokes like a riot or something, a state of emergency, and they get elevated powers, we have to wait and see. We're going off what Chris is saying here. I don't want to go completely off the deep end there, but that's pretty crazy if that's true. But next news podcast, we'll talk about that if I can find the article. On that note, we've been going for, where are we? Where is my timer? Nearly 2 hours.
A good 2 hours.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap things up here, ladies and gents. Chat, you've been awesome. Thank you for all the great questions we were able to put into the chat, both prepared and on notice with Jim Sarantinos. It was a really good chat with the CEO of the Parramatta Eels. Some great insight there, as much as he could share. And then our ramshackle NRL and Parramatta News podcast that came after it. Thank you for sitting by and talking. And we will be back shortly for the preview podcast later in the week. But in the meantime, Sixties is always a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan, and Parramatta, as well as Parramatta Leagues Club, home of the Parramatta Eels. Massive thanks to both our partners there for the support they give to the show. And of course,
and we're actually there this week.
That's
John,
right.
Yeah, Titans.
It's home against the Titans. I'm not sure what time we'll be on for. It's a 6:15 kickoff.
It'll be roughly about that 4 o'clock mark.
So
I think.
Look for 4
Something
o'clock.
like that. So, yeah.
We'll wait and see what our guest is. Maybe by the preview podcast, you have some clarity on that situation, Craig.
Yes. Yep.
But in the meantime, thank you guys for persevering through 2 hours of this massive podcast. Thank you for all the likes and subscriptions. If you can and you haven't, hit those like and subscribe buttons. Share it with your other fans. Help us grow the channel. But it's always a blast to be able to talk Parramatta with you guys. And on that note, mate, I think I've wrapped up all the housekeeping, so I'm going to throw it over to you.
Oh, just a thanks to Jim Sarantinos.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thanks to Jim for the generous sharing of his time. And I know he's also going on other podcasts, but the fact that TCT were in consideration for his time is a reflection of the community that we've grown here. And again, that's thanks to you and thanks to the Eels.
Yep. So, thanks to Jim. Because, man, that was some... in-depth responses to our questions. So I really appreciate that. But John, as I always say, go you mighty Eels.